It's day 9 of the Advent calendar, my friends. Yesterday we talked about Guerrilla Tactics School, the Mutons and Berserkers, and good positioning. Today we're going to talk about equipment and loadout, Andromedons and Ethereals, and worst case scenarios, as well as a little bit about the basic actions that your soldiers can take.
The time has come to reclaim our world. Welcome back, Commander.
Incoming transmission.
Day 9, strategy, equipment, and loadout. So every time you go out on a mission, you are going to be selecting equipment for your soldiers. You're going to have weapon mods, you're going to have combat stims you can choose from. Those are restricted slots. You can only put combat stims in the combat stim slot. You can only put weapon mods on weapons. I'm not sure if there'll be armor mods. That would be super cool. And not all that unlikely, but there's a that's up to them how much customizability they want to give you when it comes to combat statistics. And you're going to have your pockets. Your pockets can hold things like grenades, med kits, maybe the arc thrower or equivalent stun weapon that you use to capture live aliens, because that's always been a part of XCOM. Battle scanners, flashbangs, etc. The way you want to think about it is you either want to specialize even harder at whatever your character is good at, or you want to round out weaknesses. And the weaknesses are either specific to that unit or specific to your squad. For example, if you don't have any specialists, then your squad's going to need medikits, whether medikits improve anyone's combat power or not. And so what you're going to want to think about when you equip these items is what tactical position these people are usually going to be in. If you give your sharpshooter grenades, that's great for rounding out their short to mid-range combat power, since the sniper rifle often has penalties at close range, or you can't move and shoot it, and therefore it's hard to adjust your position when someone's closing on you. And of course you do have your pistol, but the pistol isn't it's not a frontline weapon. It's not infantry standard. It's going to be a little weak. Maybe you can use it twice, but still. Your mid-range combat power could use a boost, so a regular explosive grenade would be nice for dislodging enemies from cover and, kind of giving you a bit of a punch if you need it. But in general, that unit is going to be further away from groups of enemies than anyone else, because you want to keep them in the back where they can use that long-range heavy damage sniper rifle to pick off enemies in lots of varying places. And so it's kind of unlikely that you'll get to use that to increase the effectiveness of their role. However, having that grenade, does kind of round out their ability to deal with all sorts of threats. So it's a balance. I will go ahead and say that grenades, thrown items in particular, are incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important, especially grenades. Grenades you get from the beginning of the game. They bring cover destruction, which if you've listened to the rest of the Advent calendar, you've heard me harp on how cover destruction is good. Cover destruction is incredible. Any enemy that uses cover is going to be incredibly exposed once you take out their cover, and very, very easy to kill. I can't emphasize enough. On the higher difficulty levels, since grenades never miss, ever. They go exactly where you point and where you drop them. They always explode exactly where they're supposed to be. So while the rest of your soldiers are failable, especially early in the game, especially rookies, if they're holding a grenade, they can land a hit. And that is so important that taking grenades on almost everyone at the beginning of the game is just such a good idea. You need to ensure everyone's dead. Beagle Rush's primary tactic is to never leave an enemy alive if he can help it. And he throws grenades around like crazy to take out wounded enemies. Always save someone with a grenade for that last hit if you can't score it with something else. Give the RNG a chance to help you out, but save that grenade for the finishing blow if you need to. Other excellent things, flashbangs can significantly reduce a whole squad's combat power for 1 turn if you can land it well, and lets you just move around with impunity. A flashbang target is basically out of the fight unless they have psionics, because it only affects standard combat mechanics like attacking. Battle scanners are going to be really important. There's something it took a lot of time for me to really love in XCOM Enemy Unknown. The standard campaign didn't really require you to use them that much, but in Long War, eventually I figured out that battle scanners, since you throw them, they give you an area view without having a soldier out there, are just incredibly important. And in my own Art of War mod, they become absolutely essential. And you can bring more of them and throw them around a bit more, and they're a bit better. But battle scanners, their ability to reveal unknown areas to you, to reveal pods that don't know you're there, as it doesn't trigger enemy pods, but it can show you where they are at. Just using a battle scanner to hold down a flank to know if enemies are coming in or where that one guy ran to so you can snipe him. They are just so useful. There's never going to be enough room for them because you want so many other things, but there you go. And those are an example of something you round out your squad with. They don't necessarily increase any particular person's combat power, nor do they round out that person's combat power, but they give you increased tactical information, which can be absolutely key, especially on missions where you have to rush towards objectives, because you can throw a battle scanner in the room with the objective, see what pods might trigger, and then you can more carefully make a plan about how to achieve that objective. Medikits as well, you're going to have to bring some of these at some point. Fortunately, specialists are going to be the go-to people to put medikits on, and they have plenty of other things they can add to the fight without carrying grenades once that becomes necessary. So I would suggest grenades, explosive or flashbang on your rangers. I would suggest destructive grenades, most likely on your grenadiers, though they are exceptional at using all of the grenades. For your snipers, either explosive grenades to round out their combat effectiveness, or they're actually a good target for medikits. I don't prefer to put battle scanners on them because often they are too far behind the fight to throw their battle scanner. But if you don't have battle scanners on anyone else, they're not a bad choice, as when you reposition them at the end of that, like you can move them close to the squad and then throw a battle scanner and then they can snipe next turn, is a decent way to go about it. For your combat stims, we've seen plus health and plus mobility. I wouldn't be surprised if any of your basic stats could be increased, including aim and willpower, and maybe some other really interesting stuff like resistance to psionics or something, which would come with willpower, but something kind of specific would be cool. There's so much the game could give you there. There's so many things the developers could have put in, but if you think about them as just reinforcing your body, those are going to be awesome. There are, of course, we covered in the Guerrilla Tactics School yesterday, a bonus you can get that increases how effective the combat stims are. And just think of those as, I would suggest specializing in general, like extra health on frontline units, extra mobility on backline units so they can catch up, or on scouting units. And the only time I might consider bonus health on units that are particularly weak, if you're finding that all your units are taking damage. You might find that your gunslinger sharpshooters need to get in a bit close to make use of their specialization and have low health, and a combat stim to boost their health would be nice. The weapons mods. So the weapon mods I've seen are the autoloader, which gives you free reloads, which is fantastic, especially on the Grenadier if you've gone down the weapons master side of things, not the grenades, as they tend to blow a lot of ammunition. There are scopes to increase your aim, specifically good for the sharpshooter. Anyone else who focuses in single powerful attacks as well. Hair trigger, chance for free actions. It's like a 5% chance, so not terribly impressive, but that's 1 in 20 shots you get an extra action. And I might suggest that for I'm not sure. I assume you can't put these kind of things on a pistol, but if you could, maybe the sharpshooter could take a free action to get a free action. I don't know. That doesn't strike me as all that useful. It could, every time it happens, it's going to be amazing. But unless the chance gets to be pretty big, like I might consider that at 15% or 20. I don't think hair trigger is going to be worth it. You'd rather have some more dependable bonus that helps you specialize than something that gives you a generic extra action. And you never know if that action is, how useful that action is going to be for you. Expanded magazine, clip size +1. This doesn't seem nearly as important as it was in XCOM when reloading took a whole turn. Now reloading only takes a single action. So the +1 clip size, I would generally pass on that. Especially on someone who has abilities that use up all of their ammunition. But if you have abilities that use up lots of ammunition, it might be worth it. And lastly, the repeater. We saw this the base repeater had a 5% chance to instantly kill someone. That seems pretty lame to me. I would not depend on that, and you never know when it's going to trigger against who. It's just not dependable, so I would skip. So those are the weapon mods I've seen. Note that there are like at least 3 levels of these, like advanced and then like master or super mods. And those are just going to be better versions of the same thing with enhanced statistics. So yeah, so for weapon mods, definitely specialize with whatever your combat power is. With combat stims, I would consider increasing health or generally just specializing in what you plan to do with your soldier. And then for the regular pockets, it's going to be tough. You want a mix of cover destruction and grenades, and utility items. And the need for utility items like battle scanners and medikits is going to increase over the course of the game a lot. But at first, I would go just almost pure grenades, as they are incredibly useful when your accuracy is low and you don't have too many different abilities from your experience, your veterancy, to round out your ability to deal on the tactical map. So that's it for equipment and loadout. Let's talk about Andromedons and Ethereals.
Incoming transmission.
Day 9, Tactics, Andromedons, and Ethereals. So we haven't heard too much about these guys. The Andromedon, there's been a short piece on the XCOM 2 website, and that's what I'm drawing all of my information from. The Ethereals, while we know they're there, they were the big bad guys. They're the controlling force, the mind behind the madness of the original XCOM, and they're going to be in XCOM 2. They were the master race in the original one, powerful psionics. They weren't as physically brutal as they were in the very first XCOM. They were a bit weaker. Their psionics were powerful, but they weren't the incredibly tough infantry units that they were in XCOM 2012. And you can expect them once again to be pretty much a universal threat, at least a triple threat, more like quintuple in XCOM 2. They are going to be the worst thing you'll encounter, most likely. Most likely. So what are these things? The Andromedons are powerful mechanized infantry units with acid spraying grenade capabilities. There's been talk that their suit, they carry a plasma rifle of some size. It's been said that something like their suit can function even once its driver has died. If you look at the suit, it's got a massive like windowed area for the pilot to look out that is clouded with like yellow gas. So presumably they're from some nasty planet where the atmosphere is incredibly toxic, and this is kind of a suit form. They look like Big Daddies to me from the BioShock series. What you can expect? Well, okay, so if I had to guess, I would say they are incredibly tough. They're going to be really potent infantry, like the Mutons. They're just going to have a lot of everything. I would say they're kind of super Mutons, would be my first thought, as they have a powerful rifle. They have grenade-like abilities due to their ability to spray acid. So that's kind of its like a grenade that includes area denial, because it's going to leave acid spread across the ground, and you're going to have to either ditch that area or suffer damage, maybe poison, as you move through it, which is just bad news. And you can expect them to be continuously threatening. This is my guess based on suit can continue functioning. It may be that the suit goes berserk when the alien dies, and the alien probably dies from having the windows smashed and exposing it to our atmosphere. There could be a spray of acid at that point. It could be if you can destroy all their armor by like shredding it or something, then it'll crack the window and the unit will die. This could reduce its threateningness. It does have a powerful melee ability, so it might be that the suit actually loses the ability. This would be my guess. This is what I want. I want it to lose its ability to attack at range when you kill the alien and go into a berserker rage, possibly attacking your enemies. That would just be fantastic. If this was more of like a built-in weakness, where this particular unit, if you shred all of its armor points away, becomes a liability to the enemy team, although possibly threatening you if you're not careful. So how are you going to counter this extra tough guy? The same way you've been tackling all of these cover-using frontline infantry threats. Cover destruction and focus fire is going to be easiest. Suppression is going to help you deal with everything else. Not sure if suppression, one of the major bonuses of Long War was that suppression made whoever was being suppressed, it reduced their ability to use AoE attacks. Like, you couldn't throw a grenade as far while suppressed. If that is included in XCOM 2, which is just a genius idea, then that is going to make suppression really good against these guys. But basically any kind of debuff that reduces their ability to attack. Note that their suit makes them immune to all burning and acid, all sorts of poisonous environmental effects. And you're going to want anti-armor weaponry, whether it cracks their helmet or not. Anti-armor weaponry will just help bust down these things' toughness. They're definitely going to be armored because of that suit. The visuals has to include armor, otherwise no one is going to believe it. And then there's the question of hacking. Maybe once you kill the alien inside, the suit could be hackable. I wouldn't put much money on that, but I would keep an eye out for it because it might be a cool little thing. Surely the in-game will handhold you and tell you how that's going to work. All right, so that's the Andromedon. We haven't heard much about it, which means it's probably pretty late game, and I'm sure it's going to be nasty. I have seen some nasty poison spread in some people's XCOM 2 preview footage, but they have assiduously avoided showing any footage of it, so I assume Firaxis wants it on the DL until final release. Just like the Ethereal, which they haven't talked about, we have seen statues showing the Ethereal. They are the multi-armed things. They look kind of like stick bugs with an extra pair of arms. They are very tall and threatening in their robes. They are the only race that thinks for itself as far as we know. Everyone else was mind-controlled, dominated, warped and twisted by the Ethereals. So the Ethereals are the primary bad guys. And I wouldn't even call that a spoiler alert. It's just how it's been ever since the XCOM franchise started. If you've never played the original XCOM, it was kind of a surprise to run into these guys. But in their robes, looking all Dark Wanderer. So what can you expect from Ethereals? Well, in XCOM 2012, they were the ultimate threat on the battlefield in every possible way. The only thing they lacked was... yeah. So, maybe in XCOM 2012, before Long War got a hold of it, they didn't have powerful area of effect damage. But once Long War was done, they could cast Rift whenever they wanted, which was brutal. So, let's talk about what they did in XCOM 2012 first. For one, they had incredible health pool, presumably based on their some sort of psionic durability, not their physical forms, which were pretty spindly and weak and tended to evaporate when killed. But that's because they're so powerfully psionic, they don't need strong physical forms. They had a really awful reflect ability that just turned 1 in 3 attacks back at you, dealing a small percentage of the damage. to you and totally negating the hit on them. And it only worked against attacks that hit, so that was really obnoxious for preventing how much damage. You just could not focus fire them without expecting 1 in 3 of your attacks to come right back at you, albeit at a very reduced amount of damage. They tended to throw out mind control all the time. The first thing you could expect them to do was take control of one of your soldiers. It was very, very difficult, if not impossible, to resist. And of course, then it lasted for 4 turns, meaning you either had to shoot your own soldier down, stun them, incapacitate them, maybe suppress them yourself, or just run away. Worst case scenario, run away, and eventually you'll get your soldier back. Lord knows where they will be and what they will be surrounded by, but there's a tiny chance they could survive, and then you don't have to kill them yourself. And of course that denies you part of your squad, so mind control just extra brutal. They also had a powerful Psi Lance, and that was a single target attack. It functioned like a weapon in that it could miss, but it did do additional damage if you had low willpower, and it did insane amounts of damage. Not quite a one-hit kill against the toughest soldiers on your side, but awfully close. I assume it could critically hit, which would be instant death. And was brutal. And eventually Long War gave them Rift, which allowed them to drop a nasty area denial and area of effect cloud on the ground. If you've seen the Psi Troopers massive AoE damage spell, it would be something like that, I expect. And I see no reason they wouldn't. And also, for our Psi Operative in XCOM 2, seems to cause insanity effects, so you can expect collateral debuffs from all of their attacks. They also had the ability to drain life from nearby aliens to restore their own, and they would do that a lot if you let them sit around the background, which was really unpleasant because it made them, you had to burst them down as soon as you found them, basically. So you can expect them to be incredibly resilient. Maybe they're not as well armored as other people, but they are going to be tough through their psionic powers and maybe tricks. You can expect to lose soldiers to domination unless you can kill them instantaneously. And you can expect any of their abilities that deal damage to deal incredible amounts of damage, as far as I've seen. Maybe the AoE attack won't deal all the horrific damage, but it's likely to also apply a ton of debuffs. The way you counter them, cloaking was incredibly important for countering them because it allowed you to blitzkrieg and annihilate them, allowed you to isolate their pod from other enemy pods. I found battle scanners, cloaking, knowing where they were, killing everything around them, and then ambushing the ethereals was the best possible tactic. You can also deal damage at extreme range with squad sight. This was really good. If you can't blitz it, maybe you can snipe it, or at least snipe everything around it and then work it into an ambush situation. So keeping your distance was key. If you can't kill it immediately, do not get close to it. Stay as far away from it as possible and try to set yourself up for that one-turn wipe, because otherwise they're going to cause you tons of trouble as long as they live. Day 9, disposition, worst case scenarios. So when I say worst case scenario, I have some very specific encounters from my previous XCOM playthroughs in mind. Generally, what worst case scenarios entail is numerous alien threats that are not particularly close to dying, that will continue for a couple rounds. Basically, nothing you can wrap up in one turn. So you're under continuous pressure and threat of extinction. A lack of access to your best abilities often characterizes a worst case scenario because you've either used up all the charges that you had for the mission, your best abilities are on cooldown, like lightning hands or some other awesome damage output abilities, or the person who could use them is incapacitated because they're either dead due to a lucky shot or a bad flank, or they're stunned, disoriented, or something else, being constricted. They are under enemy control, perhaps. So you also have, generally, a reduced number of actions due to debuffs, making your attack, your basic attacks worthless. So you need to do something else with your sharpshooter because they're poisoned or they're disoriented. Incapacitation, obviously a dead unit can't act, a stunned soldier can't act, and a mind-controlled soldier is going to be spending their actions for your enemy, which is what makes that such a brutal enemy power. You're also going to be facing overwhelming risk at all the times, all of the times, and that may prevent you from using a soldier's actions. Sure, you want to use your sharpshooter, but they've got 1 health left, and you prefer they didn't die. So are you really going to be able to leave them where an enemy could take a shot at them, or do you have to hide them away and simply wait for a safer time to act? And you'll also be facing reduced actions, possibly because you need to do something else. So you need to hack a console. Generally, worst case scenarios are so bad that they are more threatening than losing the mission, or failing the primary objective at least. So you may need to kill zombies because they're closing in on your position, and it's the only thing that's keeping you alive is your nice heavy cover. Or you need to move because a sectopod cannon is coming towards you, but you're surrounded by enemy overwatch. The last thing you're going to face is yourself. You're probably going to be a little angry at yourself for letting the enemy sneak up on you. You may feel that the game is acting unfairly, and that always builds unpleasant emotions. And you're going to face a strong desire to reload to a better moment, or a sense of self-anger because you did not save soon enough. I'm going to suggest that you combat all of these problems in an effort to become a better player, because facing down worst case scenarios lets you learn a lot about how the game functions. It can show you how much you can actually do with sparse resources. It can help you spend resources when they're abundant much more wisely. It can teach you why you need to save your best abilities to get you out of the fire rather than to seal a victory. All sorts of things to be learned here, and it builds up mental resistance and grit against the threats that the game is going to throw at you, new threats all the time, so you'd better get used to toughing it out occasionally. So when you're in the worst case scenarios, I can't tell you how they're all going to be. I suggest withdrawing before things become a worst case scenario, pulling back. It's okay to give up on an objective. It's okay to lose a couple missions to save your squad and to avoid these scenarios where you are outgunned, outnumbered, and on the rocks. But when you can't, when you have to be the one there, you're going to need to rely more on your basic actions than you ever have before. The basic actions are the ones available to all soldiers, and it's really good to have a key knowledge of how to use each one. So you have attack, where you use your primary weapon, that is the rifle, shotgun, sniper rifle, minigun, whatever it is you have equipped, your primary weapon. You have Overwatch. It is a reactive attack you get against enemies that try and move within your area of vision. There's a lot of nuances to Overwatch, so we're going to go over that in a second. Hunker, this increases your defense by 30 and your dodge by 50%. This is incredibly important, especially against enemies that have really good aim and do really good damage, like sectopods. If they're not firing their primary cannon, then being hunkered is the best thing you can possibly do. In XCOM 2012, it also reduced your vision, and I believe it does so again in XCOM 2, so you will not be able to see much except the local area, like within a couple squares of this unit. So you lose their line of sight. You can't see what aliens are moving in front of them, but they are much better protected. Flanking undoes hunker completely, so do not hunker if the threat that you're worried about can actually move around and flank you. It does end your turn, as does attacking and overwatching. Reload, this takes only one action, doesn't end your turn. You are going to want to reload all the time anyway. Just reload before every shot unless you have to move. If you're not moving, reload and then shoot. There's no reason not to, and if you run out of ammo, then you have to waste a whole turn most of the time. Or it could be, it's just continuously reload whenever possible. Then you have moving and dashing. A move, or a blue move, is a single, it costs only one action, and it gets you from point A to point B. Very powerful when it comes to positioning. It's basically, it's just one of the basic actions. How you move is going to be really important. Remember, you can set waypoints to avoid breaking concealment or running Overwatch half the time. Move also triggers Overwatch from enemies, so be very careful about that. If you have to trigger Overwatch, dashing previously in XCOM gave you a bonus against enemy Overwatch. And you want to trigger Overwatch as little as possible. But if you must run Overwatch, I suggest you dash. That, of course, will use up your whole turn because it takes two actions. Although the Ranger's slash can be used at the end of a dash, which makes them incredibly mobile compared to other classes who, once they dash, can't do anything. So, basic attack. You get a % chance to hit, a % chance to crit, and it ends your turn. It is best used against enemies that you have a 50% or better chance to hit. 30% or less is just a throwaway, don't do it, you're wasting your ammo. Unless you have nothing, absolutely nothing better to do. Getting into position, generally a much better option, or hunkering, just a much better option than attack if it's below 50%. With rookies, that's going to be like your go-to aim, but later on in the game, once you reach the mid and late games, you want 70+% chances to hit before you can think of an attack as being dependable for your strategy for that turn. Overwatch has a lot of special rules, and Overwatch is going to be the most nuanced ability. The basic Overwatch, it ends your turn, and any enemies that don't have special abilities to avoid Overwatch will trigger Overwatch when they move. Your chance to hit them, from what I've heard from Beagle Rush, who probably pays the most attention, he has a very strong knowledge of XCOM 2012 mechanics, and I assume that he's boned up on XCOM 2 for his playthroughs. Overwatch, your attack percentage is reduced by 75%. So if you had a 100% chance, it would be 25 instead. But the enemy doesn't have cover, and generally cover is a huge part of your defense. For soldiers who don't actually have innate defense unless armor gives it to them, cover is all of your defense. So if you think about it like that, then your chance to hit is really just going to be 75% of your aim, and your aim is likely to be fairly high. So you can expect about 1 in 4 to hit on the worst shots, and maybe even 50% and up chances to hit on your best shots. Obviously, specialists can gain the guerrilla tactic that gives them +10 aim when shooting Overwatch, which is going to be fantastic. And the chance to critically hit, it's all good. Just Overwatch, the more you can trigger your own Overwatches and the less the enemies you can trigger, the better. Remember that when an enemy Overwatches, that was their turn. That's all they can do. And if you don't move, they just whiffed it. It's like taking a shot and missing. There's nothing they get out of that if you never trigger it. Overwatch is now canceled by taking damage or pretty much any effect that disrupts you. Disorienting, I assume. Yeah, used to cancel Overwatch, probably still does. So damaging an overwatching unit before you move. If you need to move someone and they're being overwatched, then try and ping for any amount of damage the enemy that is overwatching. Lastly, when you're in concealment, Overwatch works differently. When you're in concealment, you can overwatch even if enemies are within sight range. Until they are aware of you, you will not take those shots against them. This is important for rangers who can stay concealed after the rest of your enemies have, and arranging that initial ambush. It's very important to know that even if you overwatch, as long as they don't trigger, they won't be attacked. The last thing to know about Overwatch is there's going to be special abilities that interact with it. Anything that makes you more likely to hit in Overwatch is really good. Normally you can't crit when overwatching, as the specialist ability would suggest. So in general, it's not as good as a great normal attack, but it is great for ambushes, and it lets you load a bunch of attacks into a short period, because it basically says, here, hold this attack for this turn. So an enemy rushes towards you. If your whole squad is on Overwatch, you're going to get a whole squad worth of attacks, albeit at penalties, but they're not going to be in cover. And then it's going to be your turn again. And then you're going to get it to attack 4 more times. So it lets you double up the number of attacks in a short period, kind of storing those attacks until the end of the turn, which can be really, really powerful, especially against the tougher enemies. Anything that is heavily armored, has lots of health, or is super dodgy is going to tank your Overwatch fairly well, but every little bit helps. Hunker. Hunker is really good for, I would say, about 2 specific scenarios. One is whatever is shooting at you is so powerful and dangerous that you simply cannot be hit, and you also can't get away. If you're being overwatched and that Overwatch can't be broken and they're lining up some really nasty shot, Hunker. The other thing it's really great for is advancing and staying safe. If you need to move a demolitionist up into position to launch a grenade next turn, and you know you can keep the enemy from rushing you, but you don't think you can keep him safe, have him hunker. Anywhere you think about using hunker, the aid protocol, the gremlin, is also a good idea, and vice versa. If you think, oh man, I wish I could use my gremlin's aid protocol on this guy, be like, oh wait, I can hunker. It's definitely worth it in those situations where you want to maintain safety even when you're at risk from enemies. Just make sure you can't be flanked or it's all for naught. I already said reload as much as possible. We've talked about moving and dashing. Remember that when you move, you can also climb, drop down from areas, pick up loot, and take that back with you. The last, I think everyone can probably hack. I think the specialists can hack at a distance, and they're probably the best hackers. But I wouldn't be surprised if everyone can hack a console if they are right up next to it. Otherwise, some of those primary objectives where you have to hack things would be kind of confusingly limited. You had to bring a specific class with you. Seems, you know, like something the designers would want to avoid. So remember that everyone can probably hack. Just a guess. All right, that's it for today. All right, friends, that's it for day 9. If you enjoyed this content, please go ahead and like this video. If you'd like to see the next Advent Calendar video as soon as it comes out, please subscribe to my channel. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about Ranger builds, Outsiders, and an addendum about Archons. And we're going to be talking about Ranger tactics. So I will see you then.